Welcome to this edition of World Business Commentary. My name is Belinda Boggs and my co-host is Kristen Ciccarello. Today's topic is about remote work and offshoring. A Fortune magazine article in April 2023 talks about the idea that the next threat to remote work is offshoring. The basic idea is this. If a job can be done from anywhere, why not offshore it with cheaper labor? The article is entitled, quote, "Remote work could be why you lose your job. Higher salaries face the greatest risk." Unquote. The article begins with the background to the story. Here's the quote from Richard Baldwin, an economics professor in Switzerland. "If you can do your job from home, be scared. Be very scared. Because somebody in India or wherever is willing to do it for much less." In today's show, let's examine if there is merit to this argument. Return to the office or will offshore your job to someone in India? Kristen, what are your initial thoughts on this idea?
Wow. That's a really interesting one. Let me begin by talking about a story in this article. The article talks about the CEO of, ironically, the Society for Human Resource Management, who offshored the position of one of the organization's employees. Quote from the article. "A light bulb went off recently for Johnny Taylor Jr., the CEO of the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, as he told the Wall Street Journal in a story published this week. It came when an employee asked to relocate from Virginia, where SHRM is based, to North Carolina and pivot to remote work. In response to the employee's request, which was hardly unusual, Taylor outsourced the job to India, which saved him 40% in labor costs." End of quote. Now let's look a little deeper into the article. A National Bureau of Economic Research paper, cited in the article, categorized jobs into one of four groups: highly offshoreable, offshoreable, hard to offshore, and non-offshoreable. It postulates that, quote, "To be highly offshoreable, a job only needs to answer no to two questions. Does a person in this occupation need to be physically close to a specific U.S. work location? And, if not, must they be physically close to a work unit? In the near future, tasks that can be done remotely by people in those jobs will inevitably be done by telemigrants rather than US-based workers." So, what is this article telling us? If a job can be done remotely, then it should be offshored to reduce labor cost? Let's first examine the logic of this argument. The argument that we've been hearing is that remote work is bad because being in the office together creates collaboration, so you need to return to the office. Now, instead of hiring someone else to come into the office to replace the person you've fired, we're going to hire someone in India? This argument doesn't really add up. Just because a job can be offshored, doesn't necessarily mean it should.
Was offshoring white-collar jobs something that was just discovered? That's never been done before, right?
Wrong. Offshoring is not new at all for white-collar work. People have been offshoring software development to India, for example, for years. Why would it suddenly be the time to do it for all workers who could be remote? In fact, why only remote workers? Why not simply move the entire organization to India or another nation with lower labor costs? It turns out that it's not just as simple as Mr. Taylor at SHRM made it sound. Work-from-home research lead Nick Bloom was quoted as follows in a Business Insider article. "If you're about to outsource 500 jobs to India, you probably want to go and visit there first and check it out, and that's not that easy," he said. "I think 2025 we're going to think, oh my God, look at what's happened. There's been 3 million jobs moved offshore from the US. He believes that 10% to 20% of US service support jobs like software developers, HR professionals, and payroll administrators could move overseas over the next decade." Interesting. But, for me, the conclusion he draws doesn't logically follow from what he's stated. He said it's a whole lot of work to move 500 jobs to India, and he expects 3 million jobs to move there? And I still don't understand what this has to do with offering remote work or not. It doesn't have anything to do with the argument for or against remote work. Offshoring jobs isn't new, and maybe it will increase for tech workers, but this is about chasing labor cost savings. It can be done whether they force software developers back to the office or not. By the way, for you out there watching on YouTube, if you like what you've heard so far, please subscribe to our channel and give us a big thumbs up.
Great. Now back to the offshoring argument. Let's examine the two criteria for offshoring that the NBR paper offers. Does a person in this occupation need to be physically close to a specific U.S. work location? And, if not, must they be physically close to a work unit? Are these the right criteria?
People love to simplify things like this as though they are a neat arithmetic problem. However, we all know that it just isn't this simple. It's not just numbers. What makes a company profitable? Is it chasing the lowest labor costs? I would say creating the kind of company culture that encourages innovation and greatness. Having the threat of offshoring one's job does not create that kind of environment at all, so these companies need to be careful. But let's examine these two questions and see if they are, in fact, a definitive test for whether or not to offshore labor. What they're saying is, if a job can be done from anywhere and proximity is not an issue at all, a job could or should be offshored to save money. Does this make sense? I really don't think it does. There's a lot more to creating a company than finding the lowest cost labor. Furthermore, what does this have to do with remote work? Maybe there's another reason some tech jobs are being moved offshore.
Okay. So, what other reason could there be?
I think the main driver here is the labor shortage. An article from the Wall Street Journal states, quote, "What is changing is that more companies are moving highly skilled jobs abroad. Labor shortages mean many companies struggle to hire in the US, while immigration bureaucracy backlogs and a lack of visas make it harder to bring in employees from overseas. Hiring abroad offers a solution." Unquote. So, it's actually labor availability that's the driver here, not remote work. When companies cannot fill positions, as is the case today, they might look offshore. I believe, however, that they would avoid doing this for anything that they consider a core competency. The exception would be if they already have a presence in the country to which they are offshoring.
Interesting. So, why do you think you have these news stories that indicate that you should be worried about your job going overseas if it is a remote job, when the real reason has to do with the labor shortage?
Glad you asked. I think it makes for a good headline. People want something to worry about, and companies would love to find one more reason to compel people to return to the office, even though the logic here doesn't make sense. Allow me to summarize. A little-known economist told everyone to be very afraid if their job is remote. Then, the CEO of the nonprofit SHRM fired an employee for wanting to go remote and replaced her position with most likely a service in India. Ironic that this is an organization that advocates for company culture and avoiding toxic workplaces. These two inconsequential things lead a number of major news outlets to write stories stating that remote work is bad because it could be offshored. The truth is that remote work has absolutely nothing to do with it. Manufacturing jobs in call centers weren't offshored because of the ability for remote work, they were outsourced for cost reasons. It would be the same for tech jobs. However, I don't recommend that anyone worry about this or fear offshoring. I believe there will still be plenty of tech jobs here in the States.
So there you have it. Folks, don't worry if you are a remote worker. There is no evidence that companies are looking to offshore all remote work. All we have is a vindictive CEO of a nonprofit that outsourced a single job, because the employee wanted to move from Virginia to North Carolina. There's no compelling evidence that this sort of thing is going to be the norm. That's our segment for today. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.